All right, in this lesson, we are going to introduce CSS. So looking forward to this. If you still want to go back and look at some of the HTML lessons, go right ahead. Again, practice with that. But this lesson is going to introduce CSS, what it is. We may not really get to do anything in this particular lesson. I just want to go over like an overview of things with CSS and how it works and what it is. And then maybe definitely in the following lessons, we'll do some CSS. May get to a little something, just an example, just so you can see what's happening. May do that in this lesson. But anyways, let's jump right into it. Enough of this introduction. All right. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets. What does that mean? Simply means that the code is read from top to bottom, or I will say the rules are applied from top to bottom of the style sheet. That's simply what it means. We write a rule, and we write several rules, and the rules will go from top to bottom. They'll be applied as such. That's essentially what CSS stands for. That'll be on the pop quiz next week. So you need to know that. With CSS, we are able to style and create layouts for our web pages. Okay, that's what's used. If you may have noticed, if you're paying attention, everything that we did in HTML, the code starts at the very top left and is just going all the way down the left margin. Everything that we've done, all the structure of it start at the very left, as high up as it could go, and will just work its way down. Here with CSS, we can move things around, and we're also able to create styles with our CSS styling. So let's look at the syntax. Syntax for CSS, what does it look like? It looks like this. We have what's called a selector, okay, and then we have curly braces, and inside the curly braces we have a property with a colon, and then a value, semicolon. And this is how you would structure your CSS, okay? This is how you write it. This is the first, most important thing, right? We have a selector, then we have properties and values. I cannot show you all of the properties or the values, and I won't show you all the properties and values. I won't even attempt to show you all the properties and values because there's so many of them. And the best thing to do is like to Google it. There's a couple of resources out there, css-tricks.com, give me $1. They're wonderful when it comes to providing so many different kind of rules and everything for CSS. However, the important thing that you need to know is the syntax for CSS. We have a selector, curly braces, property, and value. So we talk about selectors. Okay, so selectors are how we access the element or how we call the element. Okay, so one way is we can call an element or select an element is by the tag. Okay, and what I mean by that is simply the H1, H2, P, div, etc., etc. So the HTML tag itself, we can call an element and apply a style to it. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is by the class. And we talked about class in the previous lesson. You can go back and watch it. For example, if I had a class, I don't know, items, I guess, or something like that. And you can see that with class, we have a dot, okay, so or a period that goes in the front, and that lets CSS know, hey, we're calling this by the class, okay. We also have the ID, which is preceded by the octothorpe, okay, so we can say, hashtag item 1, okay, that is another way of selecting an item. There's a few more. Let's say I wanted to select a particular input, so I could say, I can call, say, input the tag, put in curly braces, and I can say type equals, and then let's say submit. This is another way of doing it. I don't do this that much, but you can select an item like so. That's when it's not really super important. You probably won't use that a whole lot. Another one is the star, okay? And this is what we call the universal selector, okay? And this basically means these rules apply to everything, the whole universal body of the document, okay? So those are selectors. We can probably just scrap this one right here. I just want to expose that to you. We won't even focus on that. These are the selectors that you will be using more frequently, either by the actual tag, uh, by class, ID, and you may have to use, well, you should use universal selector, particularly for one thing in particular, and we'll look at that way later. But these are the selectors. This is how we call the element, okay? Um, so that is that. Properties, there's mountains of properties, mountains of values, and we'll discover that. We'll play along with those as we go along. That's what but I really wanted you to see the selectors and how we access the elements uh, in CSS. Other thing that I want to show you in this lesson in particular is now the way we structure our files is going to look a little differently. In our HTML lessons we have here, I just have a media file with that one image that we used, but then we just have a HTML file, so a .html file, and that's all that we needed for those lessons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start structuring our files to organize them a little bit better. Okay, so what I've done is, you can look up here, you can see I've created a folder. I just named it design. That's just the name that I gave it. Nothing in particular, no particular reason why I gave it that name. That's just why I called it. And since this is the first lesson, I created a lesson 1 folder inside of design. So what I did was I highlighted design here, and then I clicked on this icon, new folder, and I named that folder lesson 1. Okay. Now the way this is going to look from now on, okay, is we'll have our root folder. Okay. So let me come down here and type this out. So let's say file structure. Okay, we'll have what's called a root folder. In this case, lesson 1 would be my root folder. Okay, and inside of that root folder, I'm going to have a CSS folder. Okay, and inside of that CSS folder, I'm going to have a style sheet. I'm going to call it style.css. Some people do styles.css. Some people, I've seen even index.css. But I tend to go with style.css. And then I'm also, outside of my CSS folder, I'm going to have a index.html file. Okay, so this is how the structuring will look. We'll have our root folder. Okay, we'll have a CSS folder with a style.css style sheet inside of it, and then we'll have an index.html file sitting in the root folder. So let's do that real quick. Here I have my lesson 1 folder. I have that highlighted. I'm going to click on new folder right here, and CSS. Everything is lowercase. Make it simple. Please do not, I see it a lot. People want to capitalize and use all the spacing and stuff like that, and all of these extra characters. Make it easy for yourself, okay? Because we, as a developer, we have to think about the coding, all right? So the less I have to think about how I name something, or did I spell it correctly or all this stuff, the less I have to think about that, the more I can focus on like actual programming and actually building stuff, okay? So I don't want to get caught up in like, oh, how do I name my files and folders, Keep everything lowercase, keep it real simple. So here we go, got my CSS folder together, and then I'm going to click on new file while CSS is highlighted. I click on new file, and I'm going to name that style.css, hit enter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and highlight this lesson 1, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm I'm going to name it index.html and hit enter. And so this is how our structure should look. Inside of my lesson 1 folder, I have a CSS folder. Inside of that CSS folder, I have a style.css. If I close that CSS, you can see that I have an index.html file sitting out here. You can add you a notes text file. I tend to do that a lot whenever I'm taking notes, a lot of comments or something. I like to have a notes.txt file to go along with my project. Anyway, this is how the structure is going to look, okay? So next lesson, we're going to talk about the 3 different ways that you can write CSS. All right, so I don't want to get into that right now. I just want you to focus on this. Build a couple of folders. Go ahead and build a lesson 2 folder that we can work with. Build this lesson. Practice with this just as much as you do coding. File structure is super important to me. It's the most important thing when it comes to developing. So, because you got to be organized. All right, you can't be a good developer and you're not organized. Just, I'm sorry. All my records are alphabetized, so I know where everything is. That's just how I am. All right, but practice creating these files, creating these folders. Okay, lesson 2. You can go ahead and do a lesson 2 folder. Get that set up, and we'll jump right into it in this next lesson. Peace, power, and blessings.